Owamni. My name is Sherman. Today we're going to be making a few different pieces. Two appetizers. One of them is going to be a bison and cranberry meatball, and the second one is going to be a salmon with blackberry seared cake. And then we're also going to be making little dessert bites. They're going to be little gluten-free vegan apple pie bars, so they're going to be super tasty. And we're just going to be using all these wonderful ingredients in front of us to make all of these recipes. So why don't we just jump right in? So we're just going to be starting with a little bit of ground bison. This is going to be a super simple dish. First off, I'm just going to clean up some of these scallions. I just want to peel off some of the outside skin, and I'm just going to give it a quick rinse. All right, so all I'm going to be doing is just chopping this up. Watching your fingers, of course. Okay, and then I'm also going to be using some dried cranberry, and I'm going to give this just a little bit of a rough chop. You don't have to be perfect, just nice and kind of broken up a little bit. I'm going to be adding a little bit of salt, and I'm also using a little bit of wild sumac that I harvested and gathered, and this is staghorn sumac, which kind of has a kind of a citrusy flavor. I'm going to be using a little bit of cornmeal. This is some really nice yellow cornmeal. And I'm actually going to use a little bit of blue cornmeal too. So I have a few ingredients there. I'm also going to use a little bit of maple. And this is going to be about a 1/4 cup of maple. And some of these hemp seeds. And you don't have to use hemp seeds. I just have a bunch, and we just want to be able to utilize a lot of this amazing local product. And then just going to mix this up. And you don't have to, this isn't your typical meatball recipe that has lots of egg product and breadcrumbs. We're just kind of using some of these indigenous ingredients and just keeping it really simple. All right, so then all we're going to do is just make little hand-sized meatballs. And then as we're getting a pan ready for that, we're going to make a little bit of sauce also. So I'm just going to toss in the rest of my cranberries here. I'm going to add a little bit of water. And I'm going to add a little bit of maple again. Just a couple tablespoons. I'm going to get that going on the stove also. Now that we're getting our pan nice and warm, I don't want it too hot. Just going to add a nice little bit of oil. I just want enough to make sure that it's able to coat the entire bottom of the pan. All right, as soon as our oil is hot, and you should hear it sizzle a little bit when you put them in, so put them in carefully. And you just want to get a little bit of that caramelization going. And then basically I'm just going to take these and stick this whole pan right into the oven. I've got the oven at 375. And I'm just going to let those cook for about probably 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to take these cranberries that we just simmered down. Carefully transfer these over to a little container. If you have a blender, it would make this job a lot easier. All right, then we're just going to really carefully that's pretty much it. Something really simple. These are looking perfect. And let's plate them up. So I'm going to use a little bit of this cranberry sauce. Just put a little bit at the bottom of the plate. I'll just put a few of these around. A little bit more cranberry sauce, kind of just let it fall all over. And it's always nice to have a little bit of garnish. These are just some local microgreens. Just a nice little snack, healthy and clean and delicious. We're going to be making some salmon cakes. So I have some really fresh salmon here and also some smoked salmon here because it's going to just offer it another little layer of flavor in these salmon cakes. So first thing I want to do, we're actually going to be using some seaweed too. So I'm going to take some of this Owamni seaweed and I'm just going to add a little bit of hot water to it. And that'll be soaking while we're doing this other stuff. So I'm going to take half of the salmon, half of the fresh salmon, and I'm going to cut it into little cubes. First I got to skin this real quick. So half of this, I'm just going to dice it, and the other half is going to go into the food processor, along with the smoked salmon. And this dish I feel like is more inspired from the Pacific coast all the way up into Alaska, where salmon is such an important part of so many people's diets. So we're going to set this aside for a moment. We just had to clean off our cutting board and knife really well since we were just using raw salmon. We've got about 4 of these scallions, and these are just going to go right into the food processor, so I'm just going to rough chop them because they're all going to get blended up anyways. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of dandelion. Just make sure if you do gather dandelion from outside that you are gathering it from a rather clean space. So just be aware of your surroundings. A bit of dandelion, add a little bit of salt. It's not going to need much because that smoked salmon already has a ton of salt in it. I'm going to add, again, because this is my Indigenous pantry, I'm going to add a little bit of this sumac to this recipe. And I'm going to add a little bit of honey to this mix also to help it balance out just a little bit more. And I'm actually going to add 1 apple into this mix also. And again, just rough chopping because everything is going to get blended up. And I'm going to add just a small handful of these fresh blackberries, so about a half a cup of fresh blackberries in this mix. And I'm just going to puree this. I'm going to scrape this down. We're going to put this in our bowl. I'm going to scrape in some of our diced salmon into this. Just mix this up really well. Just a nice smooth paste. While we're letting the pan get hot, I'm just going to take some of these fresh blackberries and I'm just going to crush them with my fork. And we're just going to make the simplest sauce with just crushed blackberries. So just a tiny bit of honey. And you can use whatever. You can use agave, you can use maple if you want, or you don't even really need it because it's already sweet and tart enough. And it's okay for it to be chunky because you just want all of that flavor to go in the food. All right, set that aside for a second. This should be nice and hot. So a little bit of oil. I'm still using sunflower oil. Oh yeah, that's hot. Actually a little too hot. Turn that down a little bit. This is going to sizzle pretty good. Just going to drop it right in there. And we don't want to mess with this too much. You want it to get a really nice sear. And again, we're using a nice fish spatula, slotted spatula. And try not to break them up because they're going to be really tender. The less you play with these ones, the better. They're gonna be really delicate, but they're also gonna taste really good, just like that. They'll start to firm up just a little bit as they cook. Just let them be. Try to flip them only once if you can. Now I'm gonna throw these in a hot oven for just a couple minutes to let them finish. And then we'll get ready to plate. And if you see that our seaweed is doing really well, it takes almost no time to soak up. It's going to add a lot of nutrients and flavor, so it'll be really, really good. All right, so let's just, we're going to gently plate these. So first off, I'm going to put a little bit of this awesome seaweed down on the bottom of the plate. And these are going to be really, really tender, like I said. And we want to just a little bit drizzle with some blackberries. And put a couple of cut blackberries on the plate too. And I'm going to use a little bit of nori for a little bit more texture. Just going to kind of fold it up a little bit. And just really thinly chop it. And just a tiny bit of garnish too, just to give it a little bit lighter color. All right, so that's pretty much it. Real simple and tasty and fresh. We're basically making these little wild rice, apple, pie bars basically. So they're gluten-free, they're vegan, and they're really simple. There's just a few ingredients. The most of it is sunflower seed. This is toasted, unsalted. I'm going to be putting this in my food processor, and I'm going to reserve just a little bit to use a little bit further in. And then I'm just going to use a little bit of pure maple again. Add a little bit of that to these sunflower seeds, and we're going to make a very simple sunflower seed paste. And sometimes if the sunflower seeds are just a tiny bit dry, we'll add just a little bit of water, but not very much, just a little tiny bit at a time. And we want to scrape this, kind of mash it a little bit. We want it to get this as smooth as we can. I'm going to add just a little bit more water. And that looks really good. So it should be fairly smooth and almost like chunky peanut butter. And we're just going to make some just a little balls on these. And just put them right on a sheet pan. If you have a little ice cream scooper, that works out really super easy and well. I'm just doing it with a couple of spoons. They don't have to be perfect, but just try and get them into a circle as best you can. And then we're just going to very lightly smooth these out just a little bit. Okay, and we're just going to bake these at a really low oven at 300 degrees for about 8 minutes. So not very long. We'll check them and we'll probably turn them around and put them in a little bit longer. Well, while those are cooking, we're going to get our apples together. And we're just going to saute these off. So just slice these up, try to go a little thin if you can. Just be really careful if you're cutting. You don't have to go for speed. So I'm going to go ahead and dump these right into a pot. I'm going to add about a cup of water. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of maple because we want them to be a little sweet. And we're gonna add just a little bit of cinnamon. Let's just get this going on the stove. That won't take very long to cook down at all. All right, so next we're going to puff up a little bit of wild rice, and it's really simple because we're just going to use a dry pan. Just get the pan pretty hot, and all we're going to do is just add a little bit of wild rice and just gently stir it, and it's just going to kind of puff up. I'm just going to stir it a little bit to see when the pan gets hot. And it's a little slow to start, but once the rice gets going and popping, then you can start moving faster and do quite a bit in a really short time. And we just want to keep a careful eye because you can go from toasting and puffing this to burning this really fast. So that one looks pretty good. All right, so now that the pan's at the right temperature, we can go a little bit heavier on the rice. It's a good idea just to give it a little shake and keep it moving a little bit so you don't burn it. And again, this is just a dry pan, so you don't need any oil. You can try and cook it with oil, and I've even done it in a popcorn popper with the air popper, the ones that spin, and it works out really well, that too. All right, now we're also gonna do amaranth, and this one is gonna be a little tricky because this one goes crazy. So I'm gonna use this lid at the same time. Wow, that was fast. And again, the amaranth is such a smaller grain, and it'll burn way, way faster, so you have to move a lot faster. I'm also going to just toast up some of the seeds and nuts that we have too. So I'm just going to throw all this stuff directly in together. So we have some walnut, some pepita, and some sunflower seed. And I'm just going to dry toast these a little bit. So again, just make sure that you're stirring your pan around and keeping it from burning as best you can. All right, so I got everything toasted. I'm just going to put everything back into our food processor. I'll save a little bit of that puffed rice. And we're just gonna give it a light buzz up. We don't want to make a paste out of it. I just want to break it up. That's pretty much it. And we're gonna dump this into a bowl. And a little bit of pure maple again. And just stir this up. All right, let's take a look at our cookies and see where they're at. Just gonna flip these over. All right, I'm just gonna let them cook for just 2 more minutes. And then we will put them together. Let's just gonna put these together. So we'll start with these little bases. And these are so versatile, you can pretty much do whatever you want to with these. Take these bases, we're gonna put on a little bit of the apple. That was cooked with a little bit of cinnamon and maple. And you just wanted to cook those apples down till the water kind of cooks out and they get nice and tender and a little syrupy. Put on a little bit of the seed mix. And voila. Just a super simple, healthy, easy dessert. So I would just let these cool a little bit and they're just gonna be just an awesome, healthy little dessert bite.